Okay, hi everyone. So this is an exciting video because we are going to start actually playing notes on the flute. So the first thing I want to talk about is articulation and how posture might affect sound. And then we're going to learn a couple of fingerings and as well as holding the instrument. So first things first, we already have our flute assembled, right? We learned that in a previous video. So now we're going to look at where you're actually putting your hands. We talked about how to place the mouthpiece, right? So under the bottom lip, that won't change. And we talked about how to position the head joint so that as you're looking down the flute, the aperture hole lines up more or less with that first C sharp key. So thinking about our hands now, we have 17 keys here and only 10 fingers. And really the right hand thumb does not play it anything. So it's just for stability. And that's basically going to leave 9. So we're not going to be able to touch every single key, and that's okay. Our flute is constructed in what's called a Bohm system. So Theobald Bohm created this system in the mid 19th century, and it's meant to have one key operate many. Okay, so if you see my F key, which is under my first finger here, actually operates that key and then the B flat key up here, or A sharp key. Sometimes you see it called A sharp. Okay, so that's how the flute works essentially. Starting out, we actually have 3 contact points for the flute. Okay, we talked about the lip. Okay, so like the chin is one contact point pointing forward. We have the right hand thumb, which is going to go right behind the flute under the rod, somewhere between these 2 fingers. Okay, and it's not, nothing is ever an absolute, in instrumental playing, because everybody's built differently, but it's nearly an absolute that this thumb really needs to be on the back side of the flute. If you have it under here, the balance is going to be off. You're going to tend to see players rolling in because that's how their hand is going. It also opens up this wrist for performance injury, right? If you have the wrist at a weird angle, one way or the other, and you're playing like that for hours at a time, you're going to hurt yourself. So having the thumb on the back side of the instrument really gives you the most ergonomic position for this hand, and that's what we want. We want it to be efficient and we want it to be natural. So we have the first point pointing forward, the second point pointing forward, and then kind of like a tripod, we have to have opposing motion. So this knuckle right here, the bottom digit of the first finger of the left hand, is what holds the instrument. Essentially, it's the fulcrum. Okay, and so what you want to do is find the place right behind the thumb key that you can sort of balance the flute. It's a bit in between these keys, closer to the pad C sharp. Okay, but depending on the length of your fingers, you got to find a good spot, and you roll your hand around the instrument. So I like to start with a little karate chop, and then you put the flute down, right? Kind of where you think you might get it. Your thumb operates this flat pancake key in the back. Not, I don't teach the round key first. That's a different B flat fingering, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I teach the kind of rectangular one. Okay, that's the B natural key. So you put your thumb on there, and then holding your instrument with that fulcrum, you skip the first key. First finger goes on the key that has no hole. Okay, so that's that one. Skip the third. Second finger goes there, and then the third finger, right? If you have an open hold flute, it's easy to see. Okay, if not, if you have a plateau system flute, it's going to be the 2 keys closest to the A flat key. Okay, now your pinky will operate this A flat key. Okay, and it kind of hovers there right above the key, right? All of your fingers really should hover, even the thumb, above the key, which is why the knuckle holds the instrument. Okay, so we've got our 3 contact points. We've got our left hand. We have our thumb in place on our right hand. With the right hand, it's the bottom 3 holes are where the 3 fingers go. Okay, and again, if you have an open hold flute, it's easy to see that. If not, you count up from the end of the rod and you've got 1, 2, 3. Okay, those 3. We do not touch the keys in the middle, right? Not traditionally anyway. And again, they're operated with a bohm system. Okay. Your pinky goes on what we call the D sharp key. Okay. That's the P-shaped key, right? On the first part of the foot joint. However, your pinky also operates the C sharp key, the C key, and if you have a B foot, the B key. Okay. And so that's all present down there. There are a couple other gadgets that we can get on the flute, and especially more advanced flutes are going to have these. You might have student flutes that have C keys. That means you're missing this bottom key, and that's fine. This is the low B. Okay, so that's sort of a more advanced feature. Also on the foot joint, we have something called a gizmo key. Okay, and that's that little thing right there. That's for the third register notes. Sometimes it's important to close off just that B key. Okay, so that's what the gizmo does. And it's not essential. I know many professionals that request to not have that key put on their flute. So it's kind of standard on more advanced, getting to be advanced flutes. But you can certainly make it, make your flute without it. So that's the foot joint. We have a couple of other keys here to talk about as well. So we have 2 trill keys, which will come in handy again in the third register or for trills. They operate these 2 little keys on the back. Okay. And they actually have the longest rod of the whole instrument because they're keys way down here that operate, the button up above. So they're pretty long and, can be easily damaged if you're not really careful. So it's something to look out for with younger students as well. These 2 in the middle here. So this is called an A sharp or a B flat lever. Okay. And you can see that it puts down this hole here. That's our A sharp key. And then again, more advanced flutes are going to have a second lever. That is a C sharp key. So that is this one on the back. Okay. Not all flutes will have this. Certainly student flutes won't. But again, as you get more advanced, those are kind of some of the options to look at for more advanced flutes. Okay. So we have our hands in the right place. We can put our face up to the flute, and we should be able to hold the flute in a way, find a balance that you can wiggle all of your fingers, even your thumb, left-hand thumb, without gripping or without having to hold up the flute without it rolling back on you. Okay, so that's the goal. Now, we'll learn our first note here in a minute. I just want to quickly talk about articulation because that's going to be part of playing our first note. Articulation on the flute happens in a very similar way than it does with other woodwinds. The difference is we don't have a reed. And so instead of flicking a reed like you would normally with another woodwind instrument, you're going to basically be touching the tip of your tongue with the back of your teeth or where your teeth meet the gum, or sometimes even a little further back where you have the ridges in the roof of your mouth. Okay, so again, everybody's built a little bit differently, and different situations might call for different kinds of articulation, just like different percussion instruments have different mallets and, density of mallets. We can mess around and play around with the different places where we put our tongue. But generally speaking, it's the top of the kind of point where your teeth and your gums meet, somewhere in there, and you want to say the word to. So it's the top of your tongue, kind of starting at the top of the roof of your mouth and dropping to. And notice that goes along with our little embouchure that we made last time when we said poo. We need the poo, to. So you keep that embouchure shape. Obviously, we're not vocalizing when we do this, but it's a good idea at first to have your students do the vocalization so that you know that the vowel sound they're producing is giving them the right shape in their mouth. That's going to make a big difference. You could obviously play the flute with ta, but that's going to change all of this, right? Or te or ti. You could do any of that, but you'll change the aperture a little bit and change the shape of the color or the vowel sound in your mouth. So to. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn our first 3 notes, B, A, and G. Different method books do this differently. I have even seen method books that start on D, E, and F. It depends on how old your students are, how big they are. Okay. Generally speaking, if you have younger students with shorter arms and they're just figuring out how to balance, and maybe they have slightly shorter fingers too, B, A, and G is a good idea because it keeps everything in the left hand. And if they're learning recorder in school, which a lot of schools do somewhere between 2nd and 4th grade, they're going to know those notes already. They're the same fingerings. So I actually had a student once that started flute at age 4. And he said by the time he got to recorder in school, it was like super easy because he already knew a lot of those fingers. So some other students are going to be going the opposite, where they learn recorder first and then come to us. So B, A, and G also keeps the thumb key down in the back. So if there's any question about balance, the thumb is there to help, at least to start. Okay, so let's try G first. G is thumb key down, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And you can use, the thumb here again to kind of hold up the instrument. I put the pinky down with G, and you notice that G does not have a big difference, pinky or no pinky. But again, for balance, especially when you're first starting, it's probably a good idea to keep the pinky down. So we put our flute up, we find the place where our lip is above the mouthpiece, and then we say our 2 minus the voice into the flute. And remember when we were doing the blowing, directing the air up and down our hand, we're kind of blowing at our elbow here. So if the student has a hard time getting that, having the blow closer toward their elbow sometimes helps. If they're really rolled in, nothing's going to come out. So we have to make sure that we can see the hole. Anytime that we're playing, we really only cover about 1/3 of that aperture hole. So if you want to get the higher octave, it's the same finger, but you're going to blow more across the flute, and you're basically going to double your air speed. Speed is always related to the register and which note you want to get, how high the note is, versus sheer amount of air. Amount will often get you a higher note, but the amount of air is what we want to correlate with dynamic contrast. So it's better to think about speed to make sure that we're getting the right note first. So that's G. And the next one is A. So all you do from G is lift up your 3rd finger. Okay, so we got a B, the B key on the back, A and A. And then B natural, lift up 1 more finger. Okay, so you keep your thumb on, and again, that's the flat key, the rectangular key in the back, and then this one here. And those are the first 3 notes. Okay. I think in a later video, we will start talking more about the B flat thumb key, which is that button, kind of the bubbly key on the left side, on the back of the flute. There are actually 3 ways to play B flat. And that's, again, something we'll kind of, talk about a little bit more in depth in another video. What I'd like to do quickly now is to share my screen with you so that I can kind of identify on a chart what we're talking about here. So see if I can draw a little bit for you too. Okay. So if you're a visual person, hopefully this will help. This is G right here. Okay. So again, 1, 2, 3 with a thumb. And then this one has the pinky. And notice, let's see, G in the upper octave is the same. Okay, so that's why just moving the bottom lip out, getting the air up, and then doubling the air speed works to get that upper G. Here's A down here. 1, 2 in the thumb, pinky. 1, 2 in thumb and pinky for the upper octave. Okay, and then B is hiding, I think. It's up this way. So here's B here. Okay, and unfortunately, this particular chart doesn't have the high B in it, but again, it's the same. Oopsie, I need another line on there, don't I? There. This is tiny, so I'm not sure that you'll be able to see it, but that. is the high B up there. Okay, and so both of those notes have the same fingering as well. So that's the basic kind of first fingerings with the articulation that goes along with it, and a little tiny bit about how we can go between the octaves, which is always a fun game. Maybe not with the first lesson, but soon students will notice that if they just blow harder, they'll get the upper octaves. So it's good to address that. And then obviously the posture, making sure that the balance is in the left hand, and then we've got the thumb and the lip kind of helping to secure that balance.